Good evening and welcome to tonight's Board of Zoning Appeals for March the 12th. If you would please call the roll.
Kelly Cruz Nicholson,
Here.
Jeff Cook,
Here.
Rob Tidrow,
Here.
Sayward Salazar.
Here.
Welcome tonight, everybody. If you would, please stand and cite the pledge with me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We do have a little bit of housekeeping and election of officers for the 2025 calendar year. So I'd open the floor to nominations for chair.
I would like to nominate Jeff Cook for chair.
I will second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Now for co-chair, or second chair. Vice chair, what's the title? Yeah, say what it is now.
I nominate,
Vice chair?
I would like to nominate Sayward Salazar as the vice chair.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations. We don't have to switch seats or
Congratulations,
anything.
guys.
I love consistency.
I should have flipped it maybe, I don't know.
We did get the minutes from our 12/18 meeting. This is the first meeting we've had for 2025. If there's no corrections or additions to those meetings, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
A motion, a second, to approve the minutes from 12/18/24. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. Do we have a proof of publication?
Yes, thank you. This notice was published in advance. It states the time, date, place, and items on the agenda for tonight's two public hearings. I would ask the board to make a motion to accept the proof of publication.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the proof of publication. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
New business, BZA 1, 2025, petition the City of Richmond and Gordon Moore as the agent.
Evening. Gordon Moore with Beals Moore and Associates representing the city of Richmond. Also Jake Powers sitting in the audience. Mr. Powers is the owner of the Chester Heights Apartments. And I think you're all familiar with what we're proposing to do here is construct 3 new buildings containing 72 units. There's a couple variances that we are requesting tonight. Number one's kind of different in my opinion because we're really requesting a variance of density. It will be for the entire complex, not just for the track formerly known as the Berryfield Park. So after it's transferred to Mr. Powers' company, what we'll do is have a new description combining the 2 tracks and encompassing all the complex. So that the variance that we're asking for on the density will be for the future combination of those 2 tracks. The second thing that we're asking for is a variance on the parking. The application indicated that we were asking for 160, or a variance from 160 down to 100. And that was based upon either past information or an error on our part where we were looking at 2 parking spaces per unit. In reality, it's 1.5 parking spaces per unit, and I believe another 1.4 for visitors per unit. So the total that would be required for the 3 new buildings would be 126 spaces. And what we've designed for with the new drawings, I believe we handed out hot off the press, is we're requesting for 102 parking spaces. So a reduction of 24 separate spaces. The ordinance addresses per unit, doesn't address per bedroom. And I think there's a strong argument that sometime in the future we should look at that as on the ordinance, because some of these units are 1 bedroom, hence the 1.5 we feel like is overkill. The same way in the existing facilities where we used the 1.5, but we did get reductions. We've been before you before with the BCA. So I know there's some concerns from the neighbors. And if you could pull back up the aerial, please. I'd like to point out that there is a strip of ground going to the east out of this track and to the south that is 10 foot wide. That was used for access from the Berryfield subdivision into the former park area. As we committed to at the last meeting, we will either transfer, we can't vacate it, it's real property, so we'll have to transfer it. Hopefully, one of the adjoining or both of the adjoining property owners will want that tract of ground to protect their people coming in and out. We are also going to block that off. It will be impossible for any of our residents to go walking into the subdivision using those areas. So they cannot be parking in the Berryfield subdivision. We feel like we have more than adequate parking. Mr. Powers says repeatedly that vacant parking spaces are there all day and all night. So when you combine these two or combine the new partial with what is existing, we've probably got a surplus of parking. So we are asking for a reduction from the 126 per the UDO down to 102. Quick, but if you have questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
I don't have any questions.
So I'm the slow one, Gordon.
Okay.
So just to clarify for me, all of the traffic into this new development, if it's approved, will come through the Chester Heights driveway?
Come through the Chester Heights off of US 27. There'll be no other.
No other way to get into the North Drive area or back into Berryfield from this?
Absolutely not. It'll be impossible for a vehicle to get into that area at all from this new track.
The only question I had.
I have a question about the two tracks you're talking about, maybe giving back or giving to the owners.
Right.
What's the process for that?
Well,
Timeline or?
we've already written the legal descriptions for the two of them.
Okay,
Originally, we thought we were going to have to vacate it because there were easements, but that's not the case. They are real property.
the property.
So if it had been an easement, we'd have just vacated and given 5 foot on each side of that, or the center lines. So after we get approval, after it gets transferred, because it's still in the city of Richmond's name, then we'll reach out to those property owners and see, find somebody that would like to have them, then we'll write that description and prepare deeds and have it transferred over. And we'll either do it half and half, or we'll take the entire 10-foot strip. But the owner of the Chester Heights absolutely does not want those walkways available for anybody to come into or off of this property. We're going to take provisions around the perimeter to make sure that can't happen.
Okay.
So since that's the city's property, or would that be in the transfer over to Mr. Powers, and then he can do with it whatever he wants, right? He doesn't have to come back to Board of Works or here to vacate that property?
I don't believe it does, Dustin.
I'll double check, Gordon, but I think there is a mechanism for the city to vacate a public property, even if it's not a public way. We've done it before, I think, but I do want to double check that. I think it goes through Plan Commission and Council, or maybe just Plan Commission.
I hope vacation is possible, whichever it is.
I will double check, but
We want it off of the,
I'll double check. I think it is possible, but I will double check.
That'd be nice for the homeowners, because I know one that lives south of there, and those streets can get kind of jumbled up, even though people are using their driveways.
now, the
Seen that,
strip south
so-
of there has an existing sanitary sewer that we're in the process right now of working with sanitary district to see if we can tap into that. If
Okay.
that is going to be the case and it'll be active, then we'll have to have an easement over that 10-foot strip for maintenance purposes.
Okay.
But it won't be real property connected to this track. It will be easement only.
Okay. Will there be a fence around the property?
I'm not sure. We're looking at definitely
Okay.
putting up buffer zones. We've talked about landscaping. Around the other one, we put in some trees that didn't turn out as well as what we hoped. So we're looking at possible other areas, but there will be some kind of barrier in between the apartments and the residential homes,
Okay.
where you're not looking directly into the apartments.
No more questions from me.
Any other questions?
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This time I'll open the floor for public hearing for BZA 1-2025. Does anybody want to speak in opposition or in favor of this petition? Hearing or seeing none, yes, ma'am. If you would come to the podium and introduce yourself, please.
I didn't get a chance to look at the plans that were available for us to look at. My question is, well, you don't have the aerial up, okay.
If you would, ma'am, state your name and
I'm
address for the
sorry.
record.
Sarah Rhodes, R-H-O-D-E-S, 1112 Middle Drive, Berryfield.
Thank you.
Okay. The way I couldn't hear him very well since he was speaking to you. They want access from those apartment buildings down that first access that was the old access to the original park, down that way, and then to the side where that cul-de-sac is on East Drive. Is that correct?
That is not correct.
Not correct.
So there will be no access from the cul-de-sac or North Drive into this apartment complex.
There what?
There will not be access for this proposed project from North Drive or the cul-de-sac.
So why was the arrow going up and down in those two?
He was showing us two tracks that used to be a footpath that is planned to be either vacated or as an easement for sanitary.
Is it for the building of it?
No, it is not.
Oh,
Those exist today as real property,
Right.
which is what he was trying to explain. And in order to, my words, dispose of them legally, they either have to be vacated through what Kim was talking about, or if Mr. Powers is successful tonight, then he can vacate the properties to the adjoining houses on either side of that. So there will be no path into the property from North Drive or the cul-de-sac.
so well, it looked like there was access maybe to 27 up near the old Chester Heights, and there was some, looks like trees there, and is that where they're going to have access?
Yes, through Chester Heights Apartments.
Thank the Lord. I couldn't imagine all these people, and there's going to be like 3 structures, I believe. They've already built behind Berryfield also. And so, I mean, there's tons of children out there now. And so, and riding their scooters and everything else. And I thought, oh my, what a danger. Okay. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, ma'am, I'm glad we
Just
can
wanted
answer your questions
clarification.
and make you happy.
Okay. So what is the major, because of the petition?
So there's 2 different variances that we're hearing tonight
Yeah.
on the same one. One is for a little bit of a reduction in parking spaces, and the other is once the property is combined, then we have to allow them to build in excess of what is allowed for what is there now.
So for that access, there has to be an allowance there, I guess. Is that why the petition? Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? If not, we'll close public hearing. Here's staff report.
Thank you. The petition of the City of Richmond, owner Gordon Moore Agent, 1100 North Drive in Richmond, Indiana, requesting a variance of development standards to exceed the maximum number of primary structures and reduce the minimum parking space requirements in the intense multiple-family residential district. Current use is green space park. The zoning is intense multiple-family residential M2. The lot size right now is 72,310 square feet. Once it's merged with the Chester Heights, it'll be a total of 10.766 acres, 468, almost 469,000 square feet once the merge is approved. The zoning to the north is M2. To the south is R3, which is high-density single-family residential. To the east, high-density single-family residential. And to the west, general commercial and high-density single-family residential. The land use to the north is multiple-family residential, which is the Chester Heights Apartments. To the south is residential, single-family, 6 properties. To the east is residential, single-family, there's 4 properties. To the west is the Animal Welfare League, a commercial office, and then there's a residential home that's vacant. So the proposed variances would allow for an increase of primary structures and a reduction in total parking spaces. The variance would allow for an increase in the maximum primary structure from 13 to 16 and reduce the minimum required parking spaces from 126 to 102, which is a 19.5% reduction. 1100 North Drive has never been developed. It was platted in 1939, along with approximately 31 acres of land to its south and east as part of the Berryfield subdivision. The original plat identifies part of the subject property as a playground tucked away behind lots on the northern end of the subdivision and accessible by two 10-foot walkways that extend from the property's east and south boundaries, running between lots 68 and 69, also 63 and 64. At some point in the decades that followed, the property's western boundary line expanded farther west, increasing the size of the property and extending it beyond the boundaries of the Berryfield subdivision. Eventually, the city of Richmond took ownership of the property, and it was for decades a part of the city's networks of parks. Immediately adjacent to the subject property to the north are the Chester Heights Apartments, which were first approved by Richmond's Advisory Plan Commission in 1963. Chester Heights, most recently expanding from 9 buildings to 13, which is 202 units, approved by the Plan Commission in late 2021 and was constructed the following year. On July 8th, 2024, Richmond's Board of Works and Public Safety approved the contract 130-2024 to sell the Berryfield Park property to the EDC of Wayne County for the sum of $1. If it obtains all necessary planning and zoning approvals, it is expected that the subject property will be acquired by the current owner of Chester Heights Apartments, Powers Properties Investments LLC, with the intention of expanding Chester Heights. This is a multi-step process that began with a zoning map amendment request to rezone the property from parks and recreations to intense multifamily residential. Richmond's Plan Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the rezone in November of 2024, and Richmond's Common Council unanimously approved the rezone in December of 2024. If the current variance requests are approved, the subject property will be merged with the existing Chester Heights property to create a single parcel via the administrative subdivision process evaluated by planning staff and the Plan Commission president. It is necessary for the current variances to be approved prior to the lot combination. Finally, the petitioner would return to the Plan Commission for a separate public hearing to seek final development plan approval. This property has not previously been granted a variance. However, the Chester Heights property received 2 variances in 2021. BZA 17-2021 was a special exception to exceed the 15 dwelling unit per structure. And then there was BZA 18-2021, which was a variance of development standards to allow relief of the minimum dwelling unit size, maximum density, and maximum primary structures with minimum required parking space standards. On February 27th, 2025, 41 adjacent property owners were notified about the variance and public hearing by mail. On February 26th, 2025, the public hearing was advertised in the Western Wayne News.
There were 3 opposed with comments. Landon and Hannah Elder, 1117 North Drive. Reduced parking spaces will force apartment residents to park in Berryfield neighborhood, causing congestion, increased traffic, and unavailable parking to residents of Berryfield. Number 2, Section 563 states that this project will result in less than 2 parking spaces per unit and will require multiple tenant units to find parking elsewhere in our neighborhood. This section also was framed incorrectly, and the entirety of it is not able to be read by the public. Number 3, capacity for additional street parking is non-existent due to small driveways. Increased congestion causes safety concerns for children and residents. Cassie White, 1126 North Drive. Opposed. If there aren't enough spaces, how will they all park? It will put the neighborhood at risk of tenants parking on our streets, walking to their apartments. I don't want random people parking on the streets near my children. If they are going to take our park, and then they ought to build a fence so that their tenants don't come walking into our neighborhood where our children play. Also, so they don't take up the parking spots on our streets. Josh Hunter, 1112 North Drive. I am writing to express my strong opposition to the proposed development of a new apartment complex at 1100 North Drive, adjacent to my property at 1112 North Drive. I understand that the developers plan to construct multiple buildings with significantly fewer parking spaces than are required under the current zoning regulations. I believe this proposal presents several serious concerns for our community that need to be addressed before proceeding. First, reducing the number of parking spaces in a development of this size will undoubtedly lead to significant issues with overcrowding and congestion in the surrounding neighborhood. As you are aware, parking is already limited in this area, and the addition of several hundred, new residents without sufficient parking will exacerbate the problem. This could force residents and visitors to park on already crowded streets, causing traffic and safety concerns for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers alike. Second, insufficient parking spaces can contribute to increased frustration and inconvenience for local residents. I am particularly concerned about how this lack of parking will affect families with multiple vehicles, visitors, and people who rely on street parking. It could also lead to illegal parking in restricted zones, further straining our local infrastructure and creating safety hazards. Additionally, I would like to point out that many of the existing properties in the area were built under the assumption that adequate parking would be available to accommodate all of the residents and visitors in the neighborhood. A reduction in the required parking spaces could lower the quality of life for existing homeowners and renters by limiting access to parking for all residents. I urge you to consider the long-term impact of this development on the surrounding area, including the added strain on parking and traffic. I respectfully ask that the city government either reject this proposal or require the developers to provide the appropriate amount of parking spaces per current zoning regulations, as well as implement measures to minimize negative impacts on the surrounding community. Thank you for your attention to this important matter. I trust that the city will make a decision that serves the best interests of all residents, and I hope my concerns, along with my neighbors, are given proper consideration.
Thank you. The planning staff consulted with all city departments and utilities to determine any objections based on public health and safety, and no objections were raised. Practical difficulty. A difficulty with regards one's ability to improve land stemming from regulations of this UDO. A practical difficulty is not a hardship, rather it's a situation where the owner could comply with the regulations within this UDO, but would like a variance from the development standards to improve his site in a practical manner. For instance, a person may request a variance from a side yard setback due to a large tree, which is blocking the only location that would meet the development standards for a new garage location. Staff recommends approving the application to exceed the maximum number of primary structures and the minimum required parking spaces standards in the intense multiple-family residential district. Due to these findings of facts. Number one, the approval of the variances will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because the 1.66 acre subject property is zoned for multifamily use and currently has no street access. Merging with and expanding the existing Chester Heights apartments is a reasonable use of this property. The petitioner has committed to working with the city's emergency management services on the proposed parking lot to satisfy all safety requirements related to the ingress, egress, the drive dimensions, turning radius, and lane widths. These will be established in accordance with EMS expectations prior to the submission of the final development plan. Further, the petitioner has a strong track record of investing in and improving the Chester Heights apartments. Multifamily housing is a need for the city, and safe, clean, and well-maintained housing promotes public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Number two, the use and the value of the area adjacent to the property included in this variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because this area has been developed over the past several decades to accommodate dense housing. To the south and east of the subject property are compact single-family homes that were platted in 1939 as the Berryfield subdivision. North of the subject property is, of course, the existing Chester Heights complex, approved in 1965 and now consisting of 13 buildings and 202 dwelling units. Farther east and northeast of the property is the Oak Park and Oak Park Hills subdivisions, as platted between 1967 and 2007 and zoned for high-intensity single-family homes. The addition of these three buildings will not affect the area in a substantially adverse manner, and the proposed parking lot will be similar to the existing Chester Heights parking, which is below the minimum 1.75 spaces per unit, having received the same variance prior to the previous expansion in 2021. Number three, the strict application of the terms of the ordinance will result in a practical difficulty in the use of the property because the request to exceed the maximum of 13 buildings is only necessary because the subject 1.66 acre property intends to merge with the 10.77 acre adjacent property. If the intention was to remain a distinct parcel, the three buildings proposed for the site would not require a variance. Finally, reducing the number of unnecessary parking spaces will improve the subject property in a practical manner. Prior to the 2021 expansion of the Chester Heights complex, there were 106 units and 142 parking spaces, 1.3 per unit, with no documented issues related to a lack of parking. The current layout included in this petition indicates an addition of 102 new parking spaces for the 72 units. That is approximately 1.42 spaces per unit, which is comparable. As a further point of reference in comparison, BZA 29-2012, a variance of development standards for the Richmond Flats at 3001 Westcart Road granted a minimum of 0.8 parking spaces per unit. There are two written commitments. The maximum number of the total primary structures on the property shall not exceed 16. The minimum total parking spaces per unit shall not be less than 1.2 spaces per unit. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions to the staff?
I have no questions.
Thank you.
Hearing no questions, we call the roll.
Kelly, Cruz Nicholson,
We gotta make a motion.
Oh, yeah, we got to make a motion first. Sorry about that. Do I have a motion to approve BZA 1, 2025?
I'll make a motion to approve BZA 1, 2025, based on the finding of fact with two written commitments.
Second.
I have a motion and 2 seconds to approve BZA 1-2025 based on the finding of facts and the two written commitments. Now will you call the roll?
Kelly Cruz Nicholson,
Aye.
Jeff Tidrow, or Jeff Cook, sorry,
Aye.
Rob Tidrow,
Aye.
Sayward Salazar.
Aye.
Motion carries. Good luck with your project. Next on the agenda is BZA 2, 2025.
My name is George Sowers, and my office is 111 South 7th Street, Richmond, Indiana. And I am here on behalf of the applicant, which is the Wayne Township Trustee's Office. The petition is for a variance to permit temporary shelter for victims of domestic abuse and others needing safe housing. This comes about because even though this building, 15 South 11th, is in a general commercial district which permits motels and hotels, the definitions of those uses require that it be open to the general public and that the residents pay a fee, neither of which would apply here. However, the history of this building is it's been previously used since about 2000 by the YWCA and Genesis of Richmond, which is another name for the YW, as a shelter for people, victims of abuse seeking shelter. The reason we're asking for this is that was a non-conforming use, but more than a year has expired since the discontinuance of that use. I think their use expired late 2021. So the history of the building is that it began, it was owned by the state of Indiana and built in the early 70s for what I then called the unemployment office, but it's now workforce development. and was used then until the YWCA took it over. And it was used for very much the same use as we're requesting, except in talking to Susan Isaacs, the trustee, and I'm going to ask her to address you briefly, I think probably she'll be even more limited in what she's doing. And I did see a couple letters in opposition, and I think the writers didn't fully understand the use because these people are seeking safety, and they will be selected by the trustee, Susan now, and they will actually be locked in, and there will be an alarm system. The building will be staffed anytime that there are domestic abuse victims or people seeking shelter there. And Susan's objective is to get them back out in a safe place or with a job or both as soon as possible. It's not long-term use, and the residents are not going to be free to roam the streets, and they're seeking safety, and they're going to provide it. In fact, Susan tells me if the alarm goes off, if they leave without knowledge, then everybody's going to be on the alert. So they're going to be there for their protection. Really, that's a summary of what we're wanting to do. We're wanting to continue what was a prior non-conforming use, except our time has expired. We would permit a hotel or motel, except we're not charging them. So I think Susan has provided the staff with pictures of what it looks like. They've spent quite a bit of money remodeling it to make it safe. She tells me there are going to be 3 or 4 rooms, she can tell you, with bunk beds for temporary shelter. And I would like for her to summarize her plans so that you are comfortable with the proposed use. So I would like to turn this over to Susan Isaacs, who is the Wayne Township trustee.
Contrary to what apparently people think from the rumors, we do not
Can I
strive
interrupt
to
you just
become a
1 second?
homeless shelter. I'm Susan Isaacs, Wayne Township trustee. I live at 715 Northwood Drive. We do not strive to become a homeless shelter or a soup kitchen. We strive to serve our community in other meaningful and impactful ways that are not being addressed. We are seeking a variance to create a space in the basement level of the building that we are preparing to become our office, and where women and their children could stay for a very short period of time that are escaping a bad situation, domestic violence, that needs a safe place to go. Right now in Richmond, Indiana, there is no place for one. I sat at the first meeting, I'm supposed to be brief, but I got to tell you this one thing. I sat at the first meeting where they were explaining that it was so much better, all the research said that you should go out and visit them and stuff. It's not the housing. Well, I disagreed so much I almost my head almost exploded. I was ashamed of how mad I got the next day. But it's been something that's just, it's not acceptable. The lady sitting across from me was a minister. She said 2 weeks ago, we couldn't find a place for a woman to go, and there were 16 of us around the table, so I'm not exaggerating. 2 days or 2 weeks or some short period of time after that happened, the husband got a hammer and beat the crap out of his wife's head and almost killed her. Because there was no place for, that's not okay. I'm a woman, and we treat women like they're not as important in so many ways. Their safety should be important. We should at least have a resource that's available in those situations. Okay. Mm-hmm. The passion is gone, now I'll read. Our goal is to assist in getting the family that is in crisis connected with services and resources they may need to get into a safe home as quickly as possible. I believe our presence at 15 South 11th Street will have a positive impact on the downtown area. My staff and I have a strong commitment to improving the building inside and out and maintaining those improvements. We'll be good neighbors. We pick up trash. We repair what's needed. We take a lot of pride in our work and our workplace. The Martha Dwyer Center at 1417 North A is about 8 years or 10 years, about 8 years old, I think. And you just need to walk in there and see. It still looks like it did when it was brand new. And we did that with our own hands because it was a smaller building. Be happy to give anybody a tour. I'm so proud of that place. It's a gorgeous, wonderful place that does all kinds of really nice things for the community and in the community with all kinds of a diverse group of people. So we do take care of our stuff, and you should go drive by right now and see how clean the dumpsters are where we are just now preparing. And the place where it's just unbelievable how great of a crew I have and how that will, and I know most of the complaints are people fearing that it's a regular place where people could just pop in and hang out there and stuff, and it's not that at all. We're talking about probably, most of the time, we probably won't have anybody, but when somebody comes in and it's one person and a couple of kids, that's what the focus is. I'll be staying there all night, you'll be staying there, whatever it takes. We've decided we're going to do it, so. All righty, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to address it. One thing Susan didn't mention, I believe that she tells me that they spent over $43,000 redoing the floors, dealing with Ryan flooring.
Who was one of the second objector.
So,
He just didn't understand it, I think, because he was a nice guy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan, I do appreciate your passion. And the work you've done in the building is phenomenal.
Name?
I had the opportunity as a reserve police officer to go there several times when I was on the Richmond Police Department, and this is 10,000% improvement from what it was.
Yes.
I just have one public comment. I don't know how you managed to do this because I looked at this building and was told under no circumstances would anything like this be allowed in the downtown area.
Yep.
So kudos to you, to whatever you did.
Yep. Yep.
Of course not.
I have a question about the variance. Is this for women? Because it's described as allow a temporary shelter for victims of domestic abuse.
If there was no woman in there, I'd probably have a man in, but I don't have a large space. It's like room.
I think there's only, 4 bedrooms down there?
Max.
Yeah,
And I don't think I'm even gonna do them all 4, because I don't know if I'll need them.
yeah.
So I don't know if we want, if it has to be defined as women, because it's shelter for victims of domestic violence or others needing safe shelter. I mean, in the description, it shows women, but in the variance, it doesn't just specify
I
women.
don't think gender matters when it comes to the legal variance.
If there's woman already in there, I don't feel comfortable putting a man in there at the same time.
So you could have 4 men in there, or 4 families.
I don't know that,
Okay. I'm just asking, so.
Yeah, that would be based on the program. They would decide what they wanted to do. But as far as the variance, yeah, it wouldn't be,
We're gonna do all that stuff, we just wanted to
Okay.
I mean, forever, after the unemployment office, I remember that too, George, left and it turned into Genesis and all that. That's typically how they operated, was just for females, women. And this is just continuing that use only because the non-conforming ran out because the building was vacant for a couple of years. Any other questions to petitioner?
I don't have any questions, no.
Open it up to public hearing, and we'll close public hearing. There's nobody else here. Staff report.
Wayne Township trustee owner, George M. Sowers agent, location 15 South 11th Street, requesting a variance of use to allow a temporary shelter in the general commercial zoning district. Right now, it's a vacant building. Lot size is 136,077.84 square feet. Zoning to the north, south, east, and west is all general commercial. The land use to the north is the pawn shop and a general store. To the south is residential multifamily. To the east is the car wash, and to the west is Ryan's Flooring and Roxy's. The proposed variance would allow a temporary shelter for victims of domestic violence or others needing safe shelter. Since 2000, the subject property has had a variety of permitted uses, including the YWCA, Genesis of Richmond, and A Better Way Services Incorporated, which offer temporary shelter and support services to women and men fleeing domestic violence, among other adult situations. The property was most recently used for temporary shelter in 2021 and thus lost its legal non-conforming status. The temporary shelter is distinct from hotels, motels, which are a permitted use in the general commercial district, as the use is not commercial and will not be offered to the general public for a fee. The property has not previously been granted a variance. On February 26, 2025, the public hearing was advertised in the Western Wayne News. On February 27th, 31 adjacent property owners were notified about the variance and public hearing by mail.
We received 2 opposed with comments. Michael Shanley, MF Enterprises, 12 South 11th Street. For the same common sense reasons that you do not put temporary shelters, quote, in a shopping center, mall, retail, or business area, the negative impact that is introduced outside of and beyond the control or responsibility of the shelter's owner/operator is of no consequence, financially or otherwise, to them. The burden this brings falls to the businesses, their employees, customers, and local residents. The added negative impact to city services, police, ambulance, and fire are of no consequence to the shelter's owners/operators. Most operate nonprofit status 501c3, not contributing to the city services, unlike for-profit businesses, quote, dependent on customers and repeat business, quote, along with residents that indeed pay the taxes for city services. The habitants of these shelters and their associates are out of control, disruptive, combative, and violent. We have lost enough paying customers and have garnered quite the reputation as a bad place to shop, eat, or visit. I don't know anyone wanting to live in the downtown area. How about you? When the habitants and their associates are outside of the, quote, shelter, the public nuisance begins. Again, the out of control and responsibility of those who facilitate the burden/blight they create, they shoulder no negative impact or consequence. The radius is very small from where they stay, feed, and go to the bathroom. As most have no means of transportation, the habitants do not stray far from the area. The trash generated in the alleys, streets, and parking lots increases and is left to the businesses and neighbors to constantly clean up. You see, our world becomes their trash can and our responsibility, as is the repair to broken windows, doors, and graffiti removal. I have needed to defend and protect my customers against bad behavior, begging, propositioning, panhandling, and aggressive violence and theft, to name but a few. Customers tell their friends of this bad experience, and they never come back. If weather is poor, hot, rain, cold, or snow, they want to be inside and are not as paying customers. This is why McDonald's makes their Wi-Fi private and changes the password often. If a drug connection can be had, we then have to deal with the crazy and/or the stench as a cherry on top. I have been here since 2000. What I saw then was a city promising a up-and-coming downtown retail with a vision to revitalize its school district. This is why I invested in these properties. Had I but known the city would turn downtown into a homeless shelter and soup kitchen, I certainly would have invested elsewhere. For these reasons, and many more, I am opposed to this petition.
Sorry, could you read the name of the person that?
Michael Shanley, MF Enterprises, All-American Pawn, 12 South 11th Street.
Thank you.
Aaron Ryan, Ryan's Flooring, 20 South 11th Street. I am currently opposed to the petition for the following reasons. One, no description of what services the shelter will be used for or the type of relief they will offer. Two, safety concerns. A shelter could attract individuals who may engage in disruptive behavior, creating safety concerns for your employees, customers, or tenants. There could also be concerns about increased crime in the area, such as theft or vandalism. Three, impact on customer perception. Some customers might feel uncomfortable with the proximity of a shelter and could be deterred from visiting your business. If the shelter is not managed well, it could affect the atmosphere of the neighborhood, leading to a perception of the area as unsafe or undesirable. Property value impact. Businesses often view their location as an investment, and some may fear that the introduction of a shelter could negatively affect property values, either by making the area less desirable or by contributing to a perception of decline in the neighborhood. Parking and traffic issues. Shelters can sometimes become or bring increased traffic or parking issues, especially if they offer services to a large number of people. This could make it more difficult for your customers to find parking or navigate the area, potentially harming your business. Economic impact. A shelter could reduce foot traffic in the area for local businesses, either because potential customers avoid the area or because they feel the shelter contributes to an overall decline in the area's appeal. Liability concerns. Some business owners worry about increased liability or insurance costs if a shelter is nearby, particularly if incidents involving shelter residents, such as accidents or confrontations, affect the surrounding area or your business. And number 8, community image and branding. If your business is part of a certain image or brand that emphasizes a particular type of clientele, you may feel that a shelter does not align with your business's images or values, potentially impacting your customer base. Work at Ryan's Flooring or the surrounding businesses.
Thank you. The planning staff consulted with all city departments and utilities to determine any objections based on public health and safety. No objections were raised. Staff recommends approving the petition to allow temporary shelter to operate in the general commercial zoning district upon these findings of facts. Number 1, the approval of the variance will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because the proposed use for a temporary shelter is not a permitted use, but hotel motel is. Both are similar in use. The fact that the trustee's office will select the occupants and no fees will be charged will not be discernible to the public. Number 2, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because the building has been used in a similar fashion prior but lost its legal nonconformity. Number 3, the need for the variance does arise from condition peculiar to the property involved because the property has long functioned in precisely this manner. The permitted use as a hotel motel requires lodging to be offered to the public for a fee. The proposed use will be limited to those persons designated by the trustee's office and fees will not be charged. The strict application of the terms of the ordinance will constitute an unnecessary hardship if applied to the property because, as noted above, this building has an established history of allowing temporary lodging, and to deny the property to reconvene this would likely create a hardship for the property in that it would reduce the possible uses for a building that has operated as a temporary shelter for decades. The approval does not interfere substantially with the Richmond Rising Community Action Plan because the Richmond Rising Comprehensive Plan used data and public input to identify 6 predominant challenges facing the city, and one of the 6 was related to the city's ability to provide adequate social services. As the only urban center in East Central Indiana, Richmond is the primary provider of social services for a market area of roughly 85,000 people, and providing adequate resources is an ongoing challenge that the plan seeks to address. Additionally, the plan's future land use map identifies the subject property as urban mixed use moving forward. Among numerous land use attributes for the urban mixed use place type, the plan identifies public social service institutions as an appropriate use within this area. Therefore, the proposed temporary shelter is compatible with the Richmond Rising Plan, and there are no written commitments, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Have any questions?
No questions?
No questions.
Hearing no questions, I would entertain a motion for BZA 2-2025.
So moved.
Second.
Again, I have a motion in 2 seconds to approve BZA 2-2025 based on the finding of fact. Call the roll.
Kelly Cruz Nicholson,
Aye.
Jeff Cook,
Aye.
Rob Tidrow,
Aye.
Sayward Salazar.
Aye.
Motion carries. Good luck. Thank you for doing what you do.
Yeah.
The filing deadline for next month's meeting was today, and next month's meeting will be April the 8th. Filing deadline for next month's April 8th hearing, yes. And I believe we have 3 on the agenda. With that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
You are watching Whitewater Government Television, WGTV, Channel 11, part of the Whitewater Community Television family of stations.